This is the story of a journey that began 1400 years ago, from continent to continent, from generation to generation. It has inspired the creation of some of the most extraordinary buildings in the world.
You're connected to the future and the past.
And this mosque is one of the mosques that the whole world speaks about.
Buildings which tell a story through times of conflict and confrontation.
Sure, they'll change who owns what at any given time, but destroying, that's a very different matter.
Of harmony and achievement.
A structure with a very deep past, but hopefully also with a very vibrant future.
The place where the journey began. A journey made through the centuries. A journey still being made for the first time today. A journey that now brings millions of people every year to a single building in a single city.
I feel like I have to go there for my soul. It's the biggest wish of my life.
A journey into an entire way of life. It is a story of what Muslims believe.
I think it's a religion of peace. Some people have forgotten that.
This is the story of Islam. A story told through our own journey around 7 wonders of the Muslim world. Five times a day all over the world, hundreds of millions of people punctuate their daily lives with prayer. They start at dawn. They are timed to follow the sun across the sky until it sets. After dark, the final prayer is said. As Islam has spread, these prayers have become part of daily life across the whole world. And it's through prayer that every Muslim in the world is continually connected, all praying in the direction of the city where their religion began. The first and most important wonder of the Muslim world. Mecca. Mecca, the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad and the religion he began teaching 1400 years ago. In the Grand Mosque in Mecca stands the building known as the Kaaba. This is the single most important site in Islam. Every time any Muslim anywhere in the world say their prayers, they face in the direction of this single building.
The Kaaba is just something which is the house itself, the way it was built. This is the meaning in Arabic. But in fact, it's the symbol of God's house, God's where He's not here, but this is the symbol of His presence on earth, where the Muslims has to go, and there is no images, nothing there to represent Him, because we should not represent God. So it's a place without a physical presence, but a spiritual presence.
In essence, the most beautiful thing about Mecca is the Kaaba itself, and its beauty is in its simplicity. It's a black box. And it's a black box which people circumambulate, and it is just so divinely simple and yet so divinely beautiful. It's a very peaceful place. Even you can be in the middle of 2 million people and be at peace, because it's been dedicated to God for so long.
It was the Prophet Muhammad who ensured even today the Kaaba is the symbol of the one true God. But Muslims believe the origins of Mecca as a holy place predates Muhammad and goes right back to the birth of humanity. The land on which Mecca is built and the surrounding hills are said to have been of importance since the days of Adam and Eve. It was at Mount Arafat, near the city of Mecca, that Muslims believe Adam and Eve found each other after being cast out of paradise. Muslims believe the original Kaaba was built under divine instructions by another figure common to Christianity and Judaism, Abraham. Its purpose, a shrine to the one true God of all people and all times.
Abraham built the Kaaba as a symbol of unity of God. If you like, it's the center of monotheism. That's where monotheism actually begins. And it personifies the idea that there is only one God.
Millions of Muslims visit the city every year on a pilgrimage centered on the Kaaba. For many Muslims, to cast eyes on the Kaaba for the first time is a moment of truth.
The first time I went inside the Haram, the sacred mosque in Mecca, it was really an awe-inspiring moment. I mean, as you walk in and you see the Kaaba and people kind of circumambulating around it, it's almost like a sea of people. You can actually, I mean, when you walk in and just stand there and look, you know, it's almost like a river going around the Kaaba. And the atmosphere is absolutely electric with the spirituality. I mean, you can actually feel, if it is possible, the presence of God, and you really do feel humble. Now, I've seen Muslims walking inside the Haram, and the first thing that you notice when they walk in is the tears come in their eyes. It actually shows you how insignificant you are as an individual, as a human being in the sight of God.
It is to this building that Muslims all over the world turn to 5 times a day to pray. As they do, they reaffirm the message of the Prophet. There is only one true God, and Muhammad is a messenger of God, the last of the prophets. A message that has created a religion followed by over 1 billion people today across the world. Among them are 6 first-time pilgrims. All have a dream to come to Mecca and are hoping to make the journey in the next few days. All live near and pray in some of the world's most important and most beautiful mosques. Outside Saudi Arabia, Jerusalem is the holiest city in the Islamic faith. Before Muslims prayed to Mecca, it was towards Jerusalem they directed their prayers. It is a city steeped in Islamic history. In almost every view of Jerusalem, you can see the slate-grey dome of our next wonder of the Muslim world, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and alongside it, the striking golden Dome of the Rock. Built within a few decades of the Prophet's death, it contains the stone from which Muslims believe Muhammad journeyed as he ascended to heaven.
The site of the Dome of the Rock is important for all 3 monotheistic religions. It's venerated by the Jews because that's where their temple was. It's venerated by the Christians for the connection with Jesus, who spent so much of his life in Jerusalem and taught there. And Muslims believe that it was from that very site that Muhammad set off on his miraculous journey to the 7 heavens. And indeed Muslims believe that this is where the Last Judgment will take place. It's very much in the style of a Christian building of the time, with perfect geometrical proportions. It's a double octagon, and with the favorite Christian decoration of the time, which is glass mosaic. What's different is that it has no figures on it, and instead it's almost an oasis, a fertile oasis of strange and wonderful supernatural plants. The survival of the great Muslim buildings of Jerusalem has to do with the veneration that Jews and Christians, as well as Muslims, have for the site. It's not an accident that the Dome of the Rock still stands after 1400 years, in spite of all those wars, and the Aqsa is the same. We're looking at a protected place, a sacred place that all 3 religions venerate, and they're not going to muck around with it. Sure, they'll change who owns what at any given time, but destroying that's a very different matter.
Jerusalem is a divided city that has been destroyed twice, besieged 22 times, and been captured and recaptured 44 times. The Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock is a sight that 23-year-old Sameh Abdin sees every day as he drives about the city working as a courier delivering newspapers. Sameh is a Palestinian living in East Jerusalem, where he grew up. Alongside the Dome of the Rock stands the Al-Aqsa Mosque. After two mosques in Saudi Arabia in Mecca and Medina, it is the third most revered mosque in the Muslim world. When he can, Sameh finds refuge here. Today he's come to say late afternoon prayers called Asr, one of the 5 daily prayers said by Muslims all over the world. Asr stands out because it's one of the 2 daily prayers to be made silently.
I feel that first of all, when I enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque, I relax. I feel myself to be happy. I leave the whole world behind me. I forget worries and forget problems. When I'm totally fed up, I like to come and sit here, pray, read the Quran, and gaze all around at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I wander around the courtyards and so on. I mean, it's something very, very lovely. You just look and you feel happy. It's a place of worship as well. I come more than once a week, definitely for Friday prayers, and whenever I can find the time.
The Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the oldest in the world. The architecture is not unlike a church at first sight, but the symbolism differs in important ways.
The Aqsa Mosque, we're looking at something that was probably first built in the late 7th century, a place for thousands of people to worship at one time. The idea is that of a basilica, that is not a dome building, but a pitched roof building, a bit like a parish church, if you like, with a central nave and 2 aisles, except that in this case there's not 1 aisle on each side but 5, so you get a very, very broad building. And you have to think how this extra scale turns into something that has emotional and symbolic force as well. This idea of an endless space, an endless repetitive space, a vanishing point with implications of infinity and eternity.
The 5 aisles in the Al-Aqsa Mosque reflect the significance of the number 5 in Islam. There are 5 pillars of belief, and many mosques have 5 minarets, and prayers are said 5 times a day.
There's a story attached to the 5 times a day, where the Prophet's making the journey to God, and God's saying, pray, and as he's coming down, and Prophet Moses is saying, oh, how many times a day? And it's this enormously large number. He says, I'll never manage that, and he goes back up, and it comes down with a smaller number, and Prophet Moses says, he's never going to manage that, and goes back up, and finally gets it down to 5 times a day, and Prophet Moses says, never going to manage that, go back up. The Prophet, by this point, is just too embarrassed to go back up to God, so he sticks with that. The 5 times a day is part of a daily rhythm, ultimately. It follows the pattern of the day.
The inspiration for the design and the architecture, which has led to the creation of such splendor and beauty, comes from the verses of the Quran. Muslims believe that the Quran is the word of God as revealed to his messenger Muhammad. That belief is what forms the first pillar of their faith. As we continue our journey, we'll explore each of the 5 pillars of Islam. Sami's family home overlooks the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. These buildings act as a constant reminder how their faith has always coexisted with Christianity and Judaism in their city and across the world. At the end of the day, Sami's family prayed together, not towards the building behind them, as all Muslims once did, but to Mecca, the place to which prayer has been directed for over 1,000 years, and the city that Sami is hoping to visit for the first time in the next few days. In a very different part of the world, Isa is also planning his first trip to Mecca. He'll set off from the Spanish city of Granada, home to one of the most beautiful buildings in Europe, the Alhambra Palace, and our next wonder of the Muslim world. The call for the dawn prayers in Granada, Spain, starts the day for 19-year-old Isa Lopez. Before praying, he goes through a process of ritual washing, cleaning his hands, face and feet. Isa was born into a Spanish Muslim family and grew up in Granada, near the famous Alhambra, our next wonder of the Muslim world.
Bueno, me siento orgulloso porque Granada es mi ciudad donde nací.
Well, I feel proud because Granada is my city. It's the place where I was born, where I grew up. So, of course, when people come from far away to see your city, to see Alhambra, to see everything that's linked to it and find out about Granada, you feel proud.
Pues uno se siente orgulloso, ¿no?
Granada has a very important place in the hearts and memories of Muslims. The Alhambra stands across the valley from the mosque where Isa says his prayers. Designed by Muslim architects and built in the 13th century by the Arab rulers of Andalusia, the Alhambra is a celebration of Islamic design and beauty, inspired by the Quranic visions of paradise.
In the Quran, there are 22 separate references to gardens beneath which rivers flow. So for a Muslim, the recurrent image of paradise is an oasis. Shady trees, and among them, buildings. Splendid buildings, tiered buildings, pavilions, palaces. Now, that is the set of ingredients out of which paradise is formed in the Quran, in a physical sense. And the Alhambra could be regarded as a recreation of that on earth.
The Alhambra is one of Europe's most visited tourist attractions. But few visitors will notice Granada's new mosque, across the valley where Isa comes to say the first prayer of the day. The morning prayer, Fajr, can be performed at any time between the breaking of the dawn till just before sunrise. Some Muslims say that it is the prayer most favorably looked upon by God because others are asleep while it's being performed.
Well, the prayer of Fajr for me is of utmost importance because it's the way that one starts the day. If you start praying early, doing your prayer either in company or alone in your house, and you know, it's really important for me because you wake up and you pray and it starts the day on the right note.
This is the first mosque to be built in Granada for nearly 500 years. It took the city authorities 20 years before they gave the go-ahead for the work to start. Spain's relationship with Islam is a complicated and long-standing one. It goes back over 1,000 years to the 8th century, to the Arab conquest of southern Spain, after which began a golden age that saw the building of the Alhambra and lasted for 800 years.
I think it's very significant that the new mosque in Granada overlooks Alhambra. In a way, it is reclaiming the history of which Alhambra is a part. It is saying that Islam has a long history in Europe. So it's reclaiming the history, Muslim history of Europe, the period, 800 years period of Moorish Spain, where thought, culture, civilization and learning flourished, where three monotheistic faiths worked so well together for so long.
Isa's parents converted to Islam before he was born. In the 1970s, they were part of a liberal post-Franco Spain, freshly experiencing a newly discovered religious tolerance.
Several things happened at once, and we were in a state of seeking or looking for an alternative, something to fill our lives, and Islam crossed our path. Strange, because it wasn't something that had featured historically, in books or at school, and it's odd, because Andalusia itself has a strong connection with Islam. But of course, all they told us was that the Moors arrived, conquered the south of Spain, and were then thrown out. That's all we knew about their culture, about Islam here in Spain. We got to know a community established here in Granada. They spoke to us, they opened up their arms and their doors to us, and we all shared the same feelings. That's what we wanted, to make a change. That's what made us join Islam and understand existence from another point of view.
When Isa's parents decided to convert, they had to perform the first pillar of Islam, the Shahada.
Well, the Muslim devotional life revolves around what are known as 5 pillars of Islam. And we begin with the Shahada, that is the witness I give that I am a Muslim, which is La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. That, in fact, is the declaration of faith.
When you understand the Shahada, you understand everything which is connected with Islam, which is oneness of God. There is no other God but Him. And this is something which is quite important here. It's just your own ego, idols, anything which has to do, anything that you can worship, money, even your own kids. Be careful. So this is oneness of God. And then you follow the last prophet, and the last prophet is, once again, the last of many other prophets. So it's a universal message of respecting all the prophets, Jesus, Abraham, Moses, and all the others that we know and don't know even. So this is something which is it's embodied the whole teachings of Islam.
So the Shahada is confirming that Allah is the only God, that the Prophet Muhammad was a messenger, that you welcome it into your heart performing the Shahada, and from then on you are a Muslim. For me, it is the most powerful pillar. It is the pillar you must accept first.
The Shahada is what defines a Muslim, whether one is born into the faith or converts to it. It is the first words a Muslim baby hears, and the last words before they die. They are words of monumental significance. It binds the Muslim world together. Granada has about 15,000 Muslims today, mostly Moroccan and Syrian immigrants and North African students. When in a few days Isa sets off to make his pilgrimage to Mecca,